Leon, how are you, sir?
Leonard, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Hey, I can't wait to hear what you have to tell us about Daytona. We are here at our first MX race report of the year, and Leon's phone is not cooperating, but
My
we'll
phone's
figure
falling
it out.
for you, Leonard.
Well, I just did a little pre-race report with Cody Collier, and it froze in the middle, and I kept talking. It was working on my side, and froze on his end. And I don't know what was going on, but we uh we got it going and got it. We got it in at least.
Well,
So that's all that
better
counts,
than nothing, right?
right? So you got to go to Daytona and Pro Sport and Pro raced. You were
Mhm.
telling me in the pre-race that there were 28 pro-am riders.
8 pro-am riders, yes. And I know initially they're saying that they're going to run everybody, but they did end up having an LCQ and they only took 20 riders. But it was still, I mean, 20 riders on that track was I think saying chaos would be putting it lightly.
Right.
They beat well they did track work, prepped the track right before the mains, and that track was deteriorated so bad, I'd say within the first quarter of that race. It's just the track wasn't really holding up for everybody all day the way it was. I mean, going all the way back to the qualifiers, Brett Music technically, after the first qualifiers, Brett Music had the fastest lap time of the day. He was, I think, like a second or a second and a half faster than Joel's fastest lap time. And that was one qualifier with the other right behind it. Like that's how quick that track was deteriorating.
Was it water or just bad
Just
dirt? Or
the just that sandy, uh, it's like a weird textured sand. I mean, the gate starting gate, anyways, was very very tacky right away. But as soon as the sun dried everything, well, I mean, basically as they worked the track a couple of times, it just dried it up, and that sand, it was just sand, so it'd give away super fast.
right.
And obviously your corners got very very deep. In the mains, especially for the pro sport main, you had people that were just getting high centered in the corners, and the track was so tight the way it is that one quad getting high centered in the corner create a chain reaction. You'd have 4 or 5 people stuck.
Right, right. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when they dropped the qualifying, um, you guys didn't have heats? You just had qualifying, and then you went right into mains, right?
So there were both classes had 2 heats.
Okay,
So even with the pros, they split those up into 2 heats. The pro sport, obviously, they had to split the pro sport into 2 heats to make that work. But so they did that. You'd have a heat one, heat two. So pro sport, their 2 heats went, pro, their 2 heats went, and then we'd get a little break to work on everything that people broke. But the day itself went pretty smooth for the most part. Even with the vintage bikes going at the same time, it seemed like they were somewhat prepping the track for us every time we went out. So that was kind of nice. I don't know. It would have been even worse if they didn't do some sort of, and all they really did was they would kind of reface the jumps, get rid of some of the dirt bike ruts going up to the jumps. So that definitely helped though.
yeah, I missed the pro sport race. I got to watch or listen to a little bit of the pro race.
Okay.
Um, I missed the pro sport because I it's just the fact that I'm old and I don't understand technology.
Well, you and I are opposites then, because I saw obviously all the pro sports, but I didn't get to see any of the pro races.
Okay,
So,
because you're
um,
busy. Even the
yeah,
main,
what's that?
even the main.
So for the main, I had to get my butt over to the airport.
Okay, yeah, because you were flying home.
Yep,
Yeah,
I had to fly home because Courtney and I had an ultrasound yesterday, and that was the only way I was going to make it in time.
and how did that all work out?
Got a healthy little girl on the way.
That's awesome. That's
Yep,
awesome.
yep. So,
You know, I'm jealous because I have one granddaughter that lives in Idaho,
yep,
and wife and I want to spoil her to death, but she's 12 years old and she lives in Idaho, so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
but
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, so that was all good. So I missed the main there, but obviously I caught up on some of the events that happens. Especially with which we can get into some of that stuff when we talk about the pro race, of course.
well, let's get into the pro sport and talk about the heat races. The heat race
Yeah.
one, how did that work out?
Heat race one went really well. I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit biased when it comes to this, but my rider, JJ Londerville, pulled the whole shots, and he was doing pretty good until he blew a berm in the sand section. Well, I shouldn't really say it was a berm. They had like sand walls on each side of the sand section, and he blew one. So he
How far back did he go?
what's that?
How far back did he go?
I don't, so he had a pretty good lead for that, and Brett Music ended up passing him. And then he was able to use some of his snowmobile skills to pull that thing over as he was giving it gas, gain traction, and get up out of there. But it was, I think it was only like 2 laps, and he passed Brett back, and that was it. I mean, once that was all said and done, he took off.
So it was there were passing.
You had to get crafty to make passes. What JJ was doing, it was there was a wall jump going into like 4 rollers and before a corner, and JJ to make his passes would launch that wall jump, which worked for the pass, but our axle budget for Daytona was a little too high.
How many axles did you bend?
He bent well, he had a carrier blowout, which took the axle out in the first qualifier. And then during that first heat, he bent another one pretty good.
Well, that happens. What
Yeah.
happened in heat two?
Heat two was I mean, basically Joey Norris kind of did the same thing. He just took the start and walked away from it.
Was it like that with the track that once you got out into the lead, you
Pretty
could
much.
take it?
Except for examples where you would have to, do something crazy. For the most part, when everybody was full gas, ready to roll, the whole shot was everything with that track. Because it was, and they even widened it. Like I know you and I talked about on the Instagram video, they widened it a little bit for the quads, and it was still very, very tight. And also it didn't really help that in the corners they were talking about, putting humps in, but it didn't really seem to slow those inside lines. And then with the way the ruts would form, the inside lines would just drift out to the outside anyways. So unless
Okay.
you're coming up on lap traffic or a rider, and that's where it came into play is in the mains, was you could definitely tell because there's a lot of fresh blood in the pro sport race. We talked about this before too. But with that fresh blood, a lot of them weren't used to doing the long motos that they do at Daytona for the pro sport class. And you would see, at the end, just about every rider you could see was fatigued. They were tired, but a lot of those newcomers, you could really see they're doing very well, very strong at the beginning, and then they just ran out of gas. They haven't had to do that one of those races where you need to hold back and play that long game. They're
Right.
just used to a 4 or 5 lap sprint, and that's it.
And how many laps did they go?
what did they end up doing? I think it was probably about 13-ish, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Because they were sitting at about a minute, a little bit over a minute lap times. So I
Okay.
kind of lost count, I won't lie. I was more worried about some of the events that were happening than counting laps.
I think that the pros went 23.
I believe you're right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
So it could have been a little bit more than 15 then too. It could have been like 17.
right. I was thinking somewhere between 14 and 18.
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
it definitely seemed, in my shoes anyways, that race, it felt like it went on for 2 hours.
so who got the whole shot in the main?
Whole shot in the main was, who did get that? I believe Norris. Joey Norris did really well. Tyler Marlin did very well in the whole shot too. I know coming in on the first lap, those two are kind of battling. My point of view went back over to corner 2 because there was a fairly decent sized pileup, and my rider Jaden was involved with that pileup. Hit the ground pretty hard, and I know he's still a little bit sore from that. Hit his chest and kind of abdomen section pretty hard. But yeah, I think it was about 6 riders or so that were involved in that. But then also Joey Norris, who was, battling for that lead on the first lap, he ended up going down as well. And I believe it was the last corner before the finish line. Just kind of landed, came in a little too hot, and track basically the lines, he kind of hit the berm a little hard and ejected him right off the quad.
Is
So
he
you
okay?
had, yeah, he was fine. He was fine. But you had, so with that, and I know Brett was involved with that pile up. Heath Hannah, who ended up third in the end, he was involved with that. Jaden, I'm not sure who else, but there was a lot of your faster guys that were piled up back in turn 2. So you had a lot of these newcomers or riders who weren't in the class very long that were running up front and battling for the lead in that race for the longest time, while everyone else is working their way back up.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came down to those two guys worked their way, second and third worked their way from the behind.
First, second, and third all worked their way up from behind, because remember, Joey Norris crashed and was way back as well.
Okay.
So you had 3 riders that were on the ground at the first lap of that race, and they all battled their way up. And again, Joey didn't do a full season in Pro Sport Pro-Am last year, but as soon as he turned 16 last year, he entered it too. So he had some familiarity with how those races work. Heath obviously was a Pro Sport Pro-Am rider last year, and Jaden was a Pro Sport Pro-Am rider last year. So all 3 of those guys knew that you're way in the back right now, but anything can happen in those long motos for as long as that race is going. And I think a lot of them did know as well that there's a lot of new guys in here, and they're just going to sprint right off the bat and run out of gas. So they all just kept charging, and you would see, because for quite a while, Joey Norris and Jaden were about, I'd say they're about a half section behind one another. So I could see one go by, I could see the other one go by, and they're just picking people off one after another. And you could see that they both kept their head down and just try to capitalize the best they could on that race. And I remember, like, all of a sudden I just started, it was hard to keep track of what lap everyone was on, but I started looking back and realized, like, oh, Jaden is back in 7th place right now, and he's working his way up, and Norris was doing the same thing. And, there was a battle up front for the longest time because Landon Korn and Cody Houghton, that was the kid's name. They were battling back and forth for that first position. And again, Landon Korn, first year on the 450s as a whole, coming into pro sport, pro-am. And Cody, he got hurt last year, so he didn't get to do a whole lot of riding in those classes. But those two were battling, and then both of them basically, Landon was getting a little bit tired. You could see he started dropping back a bit. And then Cody had that lead for a little while, and then he ended up basically one of those bad lines in one of the corners got the best of him. He got kind of hung up, and then when his bike grabbed, it looked like it grabbed traction, turned, and then ended up bucking and going up on its bumper and rolling over on top of him.
Oh.
He was okay, but it was one of those like slow motion, like I don't want to know what was going on in his head at the time, but it was just one of those unfortunate things. He was doing so well, and then a small mistake turned into a bigger mistake, and he dropped back.
He was leading until he wasn't.
He was leading until he wasn't, yeah. And that's where basically where those three got by him, and then next thing you know, the race is over.
Wow. That's so there was a very eventful race.
Yeah. Very eventful. And like I said, I mean, it ended up being three strong riders that knew the drill, and you could tell that they were conditioning for a longer race like that.
And they're used to running them. So from last year, so even if they weren't in the race shape yet, they still had the mindset. They knew how long it was going to be.
Right. Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, you basically on those timed races like that too, you can't just count in your head like, oh, going back to how anything under, A class and down, A class, and I think youth all-star, and then 25 plus, those classes are all 5 laps. Everything else is 4 laps. So up until you go into, pro sport is still a certain amount of laps, but until you go into pro-am, you can just know, okay, I'm on this lap, this is last lap, and then we're done. Pro-am, you just keep going until either someone tells you, on the pit board, like 1 minute left, or you see a white flag. And then okay, I got one more push till the end. It's hard to tell because every track you're going to have a different number of laps.
Right. That's freaking pretty cool that those guys rode like that. So first place was
Joey Norris.
Joey Norris.
Yep.
JJ Londerville was second, and third
Heath Hannah.
Heath Hannah?
Heath Hannah with an H.
Heath.
Yep.
Sorry about that, Heath. Yeah, that's awesome that those guys, congratulations on what a great ride. All 3 of them go from the ground to the podium. You know what?
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, when I listened to the announcers before the pro race went off, they were mentioning that they had just talked about Jaden coming off the ground. So I knew he was down, but they didn't say that all 3 of them came off the ground.
Yeah. And I know there was a clip going around social media of Norris crashing on the first lap. And I know I didn't get to see the live stream, obviously, but I know just from hearing things that you could see in the live stream, like it was pointed right at Jaden when he went down. And Heath may have never actually left, had a get off of his bike. He may have just been stuck. But like I said, I know both of them were involved in that pileup.
Wow. Well, even though he didn't get off, he still was delayed because of the crash.
Exactly. Yep.
Same difference.
Right.
And we talked about this in our pre-race, who was going to win, who was going to be strong.
Yep.
And the guy that we all thought was going to be strong was
Yep.
got the whole shot and kind of owned it right
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning. Bryce
Right.
Ford dropped into second, and those two guys were uncontested in those two spots the whole
Yeah.
race.
Oh, absolutely.
They were uh Bryce made a couple charges, but Joel was never threatened.
No. No.
He had a good pace going. He worked through traffic super well.
Mm-hmm.
The big deal here is we got to talk about this is Chad Wienen.
Yeah.
Um, I have some inside information. I don't know if you do. I'm not going to get too far into it, but we wish Chad a speedy recovery. I know it's going to be a long, long recovery.
Mm-hmm.
He's a revered champion, and he has a lot of fans. And
Yeah.
I really enjoy talking with Chad, and I consider him a friend. Because
Yep.
I remember him back before he was the famous Chad Wienen. He was the guy that would break bikes in half and
Yeah.
and was learning his craft.
Right.
So Godspeed and
Mm-hmm.
hurry, get back out there as soon as you can, Chad. We're all pulling for you. Whatever you
Mm-hmm.
need, count on the
Mm-hmm.
ATV industry to help you.
Yeah.
You have
Absolutely.
anything to add
Absolutely.
to it?
What's that?
I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you pretty much you said everything there. And then, I mean, since we're talking about injuries and that, the other one would be Kevin Saar, of course, had a get off as well. And I know just from talking with him, he's feeling better right away. I know he kind of assumed the worst as somebody that little over a year ago broke his back at the racetrack. Um, instantly when I messaged him right away, he thought he broke his back again because he's like, it feels just like it did, but he said it is feeling better now. And he is getting better. So hopefully everything is good there in that camp, because especially somebody like that that's traveled all the way over here from a different country, the last thing you want to do is get injured and put you out for the season.
Right. Kevin, get better. We'll be thinking about you. Just like with Chad. If you need anything, Kevin, reach out to the industry. We're all here for you, and we are a family, whether some of us like to say we are or not. But
Right.
soon, and we hope you make it back for the second round.
Yeah.
So, we talked about Joel and Bryce running 1-2.
Mm-hmm.
The race kind of at the end there, it looked like Nick Janusa had third place wrapped up.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, I didn't see it. I was listening to it
Okay.
and said Nick Janusa. And then they said Brandon Hoag.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Right.
what? Nick Janusa had third. I don't know where in the skirmish Hoag got around him, but Brandon was fast during qualifying and had a
Mm-hmm.
fairly good heat race. It looked like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Brandon Hoag is, you can never count the guy out. He is always very fast. And I mean, his being able to see what his nutrition and workout plan is. I mean, that man has to be one of the most in shape riders on that track, if not the most in shape. But he's always plagued by some sort of mechanical failure or just some freak accident that takes him out of contention. And it's nice to see him on that podium, because for as hard as he works for it, he deserves to be up there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there was, you got Kevin Saar and Chad didn't have a great race, but Janusa looked strong unfortunately, he got passed. But
Mm-hmm.
Lindquist was there and he was riding well.
Mm-hmm.
Cody Ford didn't do half bad. He was in the top 10.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So
And
there,
and that you had Joseph Chambers that was out of all the rookies this year,
Yeah, he did great.
quite well for himself.
Yeah, was it fifth or sixth?
I thought it was a little bit further back, like seventh or eighth.
Might have been seventh. It might have been seventh. He was
Yeah,
farther
but-
than I expected him to be.
Right. But breaking that top 10 in your first pro race, that's something.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he did great.
Yeah.
I didn't see the qualifying times and the heat finishes on those guys.
Yeah.
You know, actually being at work and finding the results for these races actually is more difficult than you think.
It's yeah. Well, and that's just it. We're so used to, like, especially for pro sport, if we want to look at anything, we have to go on to the ATV motocross website, or use how I usually do it anyways. Go to the ATV motocross website, go to results, click on live timing. You got to do 20 steps just to see what the riders on the track right now are doing. There's nothing there at the track that we can use. And then if we're at a track that doesn't have phone service, well, too bad, so sad. Better start, using all your toes and fingers and counting.
Right.
But then for this one, and I don't even know how many people I helped with find this, but you had to go to the Ricky Carmichael Supercross, whatever the crap, go to that website, find the live timing on there, and then go to their website for it. I mean, and I didn't even know what the website was. I Google searched Ricky Carmichael Daytona Live, and that's what I would tell everybody to Google search, or whatever you guys search on iPhones. But that's it. There's no they don't tell you this is where you go. You're just thrown to the wolves and hope you can search the internet real quick, because that's what you have to do.
That's not real helpful.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it took me a minute to find the Racer TV link, because it kept going to a non-live deal. I figured it out. That's how I got the pro. But
Okay.
Got to listen to it, but it's kind of hard to listen to the whole race and talk on the phone. Work at the same time, but
yeah.
a little bit of information.
Yeah, it would be very hard if I were to work and watch it at the same time.
I was happy that I got a text message from Chad.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm a little bummed.
Yeah.
Being a fan, and not that I'm not a fan of the other guys. It's just I am a fan of Chad, and
yeah. And I haven't really pried too hard into that. I just want to respect his privacy. Figured that, if somebody figured there are things that I should know, they'd tell me. But just been leaving him be. I'm not going to bombard him with anything, or try to pry. When it comes out, it comes out.
When he's ready to talk, he'll talk. And
exactly.
I'm sure there will be a press release. I haven't been given the authorization to make that press release.
Right.
So we'll leave it at that. If he allows that, then I would make one for him. But until it happens,
right.
We'll leave it at that. But where are we going next, brother?
Next up, we are headed to Kemp, Texas for the Underground MX track. The National there is next.
Isn't that usually later in the year?
No, it is actually earlier in the season. And it was like last year was early in the season. In 2020, the Texas round was very late in the year. But that obviously everything was messed up that year. But usually Texas is one of the first ones, and usually you can count on some sort of moisture at that track. I mean, it's Texas in spring, so good luck trying to predict the weather.
Right. Could be hot and windy, could be cold and windy, could rain, might even snow,
Exactly. It's just like us going to Pennsylvania in the springtime. You just know that High Point, it's going to rain. It's not if, it is when.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great night, and look for this to be on YouTube shortly.
Absolutely. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you very much, Leon. Have a great
Yep.
night. Thank
You
you.
as well,
Thank the
Leonard.
wife for me.
Will do.
All right, brother. Talk to you
All
later.
right. Take care. Yep.